I got a question for you. About a year and a half ago, I was told that I would absolutely need a hip replacement within the next 2 years. That 2-year deadline is coming up this coming May 2026. From my experience and from what I've heard, people have a hard time putting on their shoes and socks when they have severe hip arthritis. Do they not? I've really worked hard at it. This is the hip right here. I'm going to share my imaging results today with you. I'm going to have to ask you, does the pain you experience really correlate with what's shown on the imaging? I'm going to use my other leg here. This is my bad leg. Apparently I need a hip replacement in the next 6 months. What do you guys think? So, if you're watching this, I think we got something in common. We've probably been both diagnosed with some form of hip arthritis. Mine just happens to be severe. So you can see by that clip there that I can totally put my shoes and my socks on. I've been working really hard. And like I said, in the spring of 2024, I was told within the next 2 years from that point to get ready to have a hip replacement, enjoy my life, and coming back when I couldn't take the pain anymore. Well, I'm determined to make sure that that wasn't my story. And as you can see, I can move my hip okay. But that's been the result of the last year and a half, my project management of this rehab that I'm doing. So I want to go over a little bit of a disclaimer again. I'm not a healthcare professional. Anything that you take away from this is your own information. Please do your own due diligence. I'm not a substitute for your own doctor. But I'm going to go over my imaging results from you. I've had a number of them done. And I think that they might be helpful for someone because they're scary. I tell you, when I was told what was in those results, I thought that was doomsday. But clearly, I think that you can get better because I've been working at it so hard, and you can see that I'm running around okay. So we're going to get into some of the imaging results, and if you guys have any questions or comments, you can certainly put them in the comment section, and I'll try to answer if I can. But if I can help one person, that's really all that this channel is about. It's my journey, and I'd love to share it with you, and if you want to follow along, I'd appreciate it. So just a heads up, my next video is going to be how I adapted my walking. Anyway, welcome, I'm Shaunalee. If this is the first time you're here, that's awesome. If you're returning, thank you so much. Let's get into it. So at one point in time, I don't know how you felt when you got your first set of X-rays and how your X-rays progressed, but mine were gradual. At least I thought that they were. But at one point in time, they told me that I had a dead hip or avascular necrosis. I can hardly say that. But basically, they're trying to tell me that I had a dead hip. Maybe. It's a possibility. And you see me running around. So until I asked for an MRI, I couldn't confirm that that was true or not. So you can only imagine how I felt. How did you feel when you had your X-rays done? I know that it was a scary thought for me, and reading over them, and at least the ones that I got the impressions for in Canada. I'm Canadian, and in Canada sometimes you'll get the results. You might not get them right away, And lots of times they won't actually give you the paperwork. They just tell you over the phone what the diagnosis is or what they found. So until you really bug them to actually get the impressions, sometimes you just don't get them. Like I even had emailed asking for them and I never did get them. So I did get the ones at the end, and those ones are the ones I'm going to read to you. But my last video, I basically went over a brief summary of how this journey started for me. I was getting ready for a huge walking holiday, going to Prince Edward Island for the 700K walk. I was doing a lot of squats, and I hurt my hip flexor. And I was in excruciating pain. And it was at that time that I did some physio and stuff like that. But ultimately, I went to the doctor to ask if I could get some ultrasounds or an X-ray to see if anything was going on in there, because I wanted to be sure before I went away on my trip that I was able to do so. So they said basically there was nothing really in your ultrasounds of note, and the X-rays, they showed, you know, I had some hip arthritis in there, you know, if I needed to take some Advil. And I think on my trip I took a little bit of Advil, but I don't take any drugs, so I didn't really want to do that. So I really kind of pushed through it, but I was in excruciating pain, so I ended up leaving that trip early, as I said. Fast forward to the spring of 2024. This is when everything sort of really kind of ramped up. And I wasn't feeling very well again. Like I had rested after I came home from my trip in PEI. I was trying to get ready for another trip that fall in 2024 to go to Switzerland to go walk. And I just wasn't feeling that great. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back and see if I can get another X-ray, maybe some more ultrasounds, and see what was happening. So I went back. She agreed to let me go again. I went for ultrasounds first, a hip ultrasound and a groin ultrasound. They called me, said, we want you to go do more X-rays. And then they called me back to say, we want you to go and see this orthopedic lady. So I said, okay. And that's when I went. And then I found out that I had severe hip arthritis and get ready to have a hip replacement in the next 2 years. That X-ray, I didn't get the impressions of that X-ray, but I did get to sneak a peek of what it looked like on her monitor. And the femur head to me looked pretty round. She said, you don't have to worry about, you know, the hip collapsing or anything like that. Go live your life. She wouldn't recommend any kind of injections or anything like that, because I potentially could get an infection. But yet when I asked her what the potential side effects are of having a hip surgery, well, death is one of them. Obviously, it's a major surgery and everybody takes it really lightly, but I don't take it lightly. I left that office devastated, and I did some physio, like I said, and coming up to that fall, I went on my trip to Switzerland, where I said I rode, I walked, I rode, I walked. And at the end, I had to do a bunch of walking around Geneva in Switzerland, and it was very painful. At the end there, I was ready to come home. At the end of October 2024, I decided that I will go to see a chiropractor. And I got to the chiropractor and I said, you know what, do you think it's possible that you can give me some more X-rays to see if on that trip, that I did any damage on that trip? And he looked, he said, when was the last time you had some X-rays? And I said, well, you know, they were just in the spring. And he said, well, they may or may not do it for you, but, you know, we'll try. We put them in, and sure enough, they let me go. I'm going to go over those with you right now. I got to put my glasses on. Oh, and please bear with me if I butcher some of these words, because obviously I'm not a medical professional. So he sent me for a lumbar spine, a pelvis, and a bilateral hips X-ray. So that was on October the 29th, 2024. And I was a little bit concerned because I never knew that I had anything wrong with my back. I never had any problems or anything like that. And this just goes to show, do we really want to know what's in our X-rays? Like, anyway. So in this findings for the lumbar spine, basically the findings were a minor dextroconvex curvature of the lumbar spine, maintenance of a normal lumbar lordosis, vertebral body heights appear relatively well maintained, no acute fracture or dislocation. Mild multi-level degenerative changes are seen with mild loss of intervertebral disc space and anterior osteophytosis. Mild multilateral facet joint arthropathy was also demonstrated. Mild, meaning grade 1, anterolisthesis of the L5S1, favored to be related to spondylolisthesis. The visual paravertebral soft tissues appear grossly unremarkable. The overall impressions were no acute bony abnormality was identified, mild dextrose convex curvature of the lumbar spine, multilevel degenerative changes as described, mild anteriorlisthesis of the L5S1 favored to be related to spondylolisthesis. That's a hard one to say. On to my pelvis and my hips. Well, the findings there were bilateral sacroiliac joints appear grossly unremarkable. The pelvic ring appears to be intact, no acute fracture or dislocation. But my right hip, severe degenerative changes are seen at the right hip with significant joint space narrowing, some chondral sclerosis, and cystic change, and osteophytosis. Patchy areas of sclerosis are noted at the femoral head, and avascular necrosis cannot be excluded. So right then they're trying to tell me I could basically have a dead hip from what I was told by the chiropractor. The visual parapelvic soft tissues demonstrate punctate calcifications, likely Philobolitis. I'm butchering that word, I'm sure. It's spelled Phelboliths. Bony prominence at the right femoral neck-head junction was also demonstrated. The overall impression of that was no acute bony abnormality was identified, severe degenerative changes at the right hip joint, and mild degenerative changes on my left hip joint. Possible avascular neurosis at the right femoral head, unchanged appearance compared to my prior studies, which would have been in the May before. A bony prominence of the right femoral head neck junction, and this was new, which may be related to a CAM-type deformity and can be associated with femoral acetabular impingement. So overall, scary stuff. At least it was for me. Then fast forward to the spring of this year, where I had waited to get my MRI and I finally got to go back for my MRI. I begged it. I said, please, can I find out what's going on here? Like, I was worried. Obviously, I thought that I had a dead hip. Like, seriously, I was like, I couldn't sleep at night lots of the time because I was so afraid of that. And it was on my mind, and I wake up like hyperventilating and wake up like in cold sweats because I was so scared. So anyway, let's get into that MRI result. And those MRIs were taken April the 13th, 2025. So my MRI was only of the right hip region. So the findings for there were hip joint severe degenerative arthritis with associating joint space narrowing. This time though, it didn't say significant. So I'm going to take that as a win. Sclerosis, subchondral degenerative change, and marrow edema. Multiple degenerative osteochondral lesions were noted. There was also a diffused degenerative change to my labrum, which could explain a lot of stuff, a lot of pain, with associating superior and anterior superior labral tear. I never knew that I had a labral tear. There was also a possible pincher or cam deformity that may have been part of an femoral acetabular impingement. Well, we kind of had alluded to that in my last X-ray. Mild to moderate joint effusion, synovial thickening suggested of synoviitis, gluteus medius tendon, mild edema at the trochanteric insertion site suggestive of tendinitis. Well, that doesn't surprise me that I had that because I always had some side pain. No associating bone marrow edema. Also, a mild adjacent bursal fluid suggestive of trochanteric bursitis, which at first, when I was first diagnosed, after I very first hurt my hip flexor, that makes sense because the physiotherapist thought that I might have had bursitis. But they did say, please correlate clinically. So no fracture, no dislocation, no aggressive bony lesions. And guess what? I don't have a dead hip. No AVN. I'm going to take that as a huge win. no periarticulate fluid collection or soft tissue edema, no mass, and my tendons and muscles, my hamstring tendons, my rectus femoris, and my abductor insertion appear normal. So the impression of this basically was my hip joint degenerative osteoarthritis, effusion, and synoviitis with associating degenerative complex labral tear, possible femoral acetabular hip impingement was also detailed above, and gluteal tendinopathy and bursitis. So that's basically what's going on in my hip. So I know that's a mouthful, and I'm sorry if I butchered some of those words, but I just want to add that at the beginning of this video, I asked a question. Does what your imaging and your x-rays say really correlate to what you're experiencing pain-wise? You see me running around. Don't get me wrong, I do experience some pain, but it's a lot less than it was 2.5 years ago. And it was certainly better than it was last year. So I think little by little, I believe the body is smart and it can heal. And that's really what I'm going on. As I noted, my next video is going to be on how I adapted my walking. And I really hope that somebody can take away from this that you could have this type of an x-ray and these kind of daunting things told to you, and you may just be able to get better. And like I said, I'm going to take those two things as a win. It's not saying significant anymore on here. Maybe they just didn't put it in. I don't know. But if it was significant joint narrowing, then why didn't they put it in? Maybe I've strengthened a little bit of my cartilage. I'm hopeful. I certainly feel better. And also, I don't have any avascular neurosis of the right hip. I'm going to take that as a win. And I don't have to worry about that part anymore. So I'm just going to continue what I'm doing. I'm going to continue to make some videos, and hopefully, like I said, I hope this doesn't turn into a mini series and I have to cut it short. But if you're still interested in following me, hit the subscribe button. Let's see how this thing plays out. See you on the next one.